Byrds that it's almost more than we could cover here in this session. He brought a unique style of guitar playing that was really unheard of at the time. Clarence's uniqueness came from his sense of timing, and he's extremely skillful. He could play more notes than anyone if he wanted to, but one of the things that he said was it's not so much what you play as what you don't play. He had sensibility that was very highly developed on rhythm and where to accent here and there, and his spirit, his wonderful spirit and his sense of music was incorporated into the band, and it I think was definitely a high point for the band to have him involved.
He was very adventurous musician and fearless. You listen to some of those solos, the way he played is just phenomenal. You know, just the energy level. He had fluidity, he had a kind of syncopation where he could just bounce through things, right? So he could create a rhythm on top of a rhythm. But he embraced the technology to the point where he could create a guitar line that just sounded fierce guitar solo, you know. So yeah, he constantly blew our minds.
And it was totally an effort of Clarence White to get me into the Byrds. The Byrds were getting rid of their drummer, and they were hiring on Clarence to go with them on the road. He'd played in the studio quite a bit with them previous to that. And he said, well, you've got to hire my drummer. And so there was an audition. I played, they approved, and I was taken on.
After only a few weeks playing with the new band, Roger McGuinn found himself to be the only original Byrd remaining in the group. Chris Hillman, having patched up his differences with Graham Parsons, announced that he was leaving the Byrds to work with Graham on a new project, the Flying Burrito Brothers. McGuinn acted swiftly to fill the void and extended to bassist John York a second invitation to join the band.
I think we kind of suspected that Chris would quit, particularly after one night when he smashed his bass and said, that's it, I'm done. But it wasn't a big shock, no, that he left. We knew that he was thinking about starting another group. In fact, had approached Clarence to join that group, and even approached me at one point. And John York, I didn't know John, but I think either Roger or Clarence knew John and got him involved.
I guess when David first left, their business manager, Larry Spector, was a good friend of mine. And he asked me if I wanted to join the Byrds, and I said no. I'm not sure why I said no. It was probably a stupid answer, but I had heard so much about the conflict in the band, and I said, nah, I don't want to do that. And then Gene Clark was going to play at the Whiskey. And I had been playing bass for the Mamas and Papas, and the drummer was Eddie Ho. Great drummer, Fast Eddie, great drummer. So Eddie was asked to be the drummer on the gig. And so I guess Eddie pulled me in as bass player. I don't know exactly how that worked. That's probably what happened. Or at the time, maybe Gene's business manager was also Larry Spector. Maybe that's how it worked. But anyway, I got that gig. And Clarence White was the guitar player. And when I played with Clarence, it was like, whoa, just phenomenal, you know? So that's how I got pulled into the Byrds, was through Clarence.
In late '68, with the new band line-up settled, the Byrds started working towards their next studio album, Dr. Byrds and Mr. Hyde. Having parted company with producer Gary Usher, the band invited one of the preeminent contemporary record producers, Bob Johnston, to fill the vacancy. Johnston's work with the likes of Bob Dylan and Johnny Cash was highly regarded in music circles, and his involvement with the Byrds appeared to be a promising collaboration.
I think Dr. Byrds and Mr. Hyde, what we were maybe trying to do was not offend the Byrd fans, maybe come up with something a little different that incorporated the skills of the people that were involved, and maybe sell enough albums to have CBS keep us on, because CBS was, the band was in debt to CBS at that point, and records were not selling all that well. So we were hoping to have at least good enough success to be kept on the roster.
We were not consciously trying to do anything different sonically. The idea was that Clarence's guitar was obviously a new chapter in the Byrds, but not at the expense of Roger's brilliance. We were touring. There was a lot of pressure on us to hold the band together. Part of the deal of getting Crosby out of the band was that the band owed him a lot of money. They had to buy him a yacht and pay him a certain amount of money to get him out of the ownership of the band. So we knew we were basically working to pay David and to get the band back on the map. Bob Johnston, we really liked him. He was not a pressure kind of guy at all. He was very relaxed. He told stories. It was kind of a good old boy kind of atmosphere. We all relaxed. It was a really good working environment.
He was sort of I would say, a passive producer, kind of the type of producer that would let things be and let them sort of manifest on their own. Maybe a little comment here or a comment there, but he was a good producer to work with. I kept expecting him to come up with something earth-shattering, you know, why don't you do this or that? And he never really did that. He kind of let us just find our own way.
Suddenly they reappeared in '69 with a new single from nowhere, just announced, new Byrd single, Bad Night at the Whiskey.
Push me off the street today. The light of my eyes gets in the way of the darkness. You push me in. You say that it's a sin. We're hanging around.
We were playing at the Whiskey, and there were these kids lining up early to buy tickets. And there was one kid sitting there named Joey, and Roger was talking to him. And he gave Roger some lyrics on a piece of paper, evidently. I think this is the story. And we wound up recording the song. And I think Roger was trying to cut a song in a mode, in a style that none of us had ever done, well, the Byrds had never done before. It's an obvious rock groove. It's almost Purple Haze. You know, but of course, you know, no one's playing it that way. Maybe the bass line, but it's got bluegrass running through it, you know, and then choir boy harmonies running through it. But yeah, I thought it was really an adventurous thing for Roger to want to do that kind of a tune.
Bad Night at the Whiskey, I think, is the signpost on that album to where they're going, which in a way is, with Clarence White on lead guitar, a much tougher rhythm section, and becoming a pretty kick-ass live rock and roll band. And you do hear that on Bad Night at the Whiskey.
Dr. Byrds and Mr. Hyde was released in February 1969, and its apparently enigmatic title suggested much about the schizophrenic character of the album's sound. The harder rock of Bad Night at the Whiskey was repeated across other tracks,